Joel Gardner, the head of the Jefferson Council at the University of Virginia, and there's been a running tug of war here in management. Governor Youngkin sent, I think, some reasonable people to the board to help manage the University of Virginia. They were dealing with the president who's now left, Jim Ryan, who was exited in essence by the Trump administration's admonition that we not prioritize race issues and we not discriminate against women on the trans issue. This has really been a point that's blown up all across the country. And there's been a new president hired at UVA, but it sounds like the new governor, the Democrat, Abigail Spanberger's got a problem with that. Fill me in on where things stand from your perspective.
Well, take a step back for a second, John, and
Okay.
What we've had going on here for the last 6 months has been so unprecedented in the history of the Commonwealth that it is actually staggering. You've had a well-planned, well-orchestrated, politicized, hostile takeover of the UVA board. And this happened in 2 steps, both steps being taken in a manner which it had never even remotely occurred in the history of the state of Virginia. First, you had the General Assembly. It wasn't even the General Assembly. It was one standing committee of the state Senate reject 5 choices for the Board of Visitors. For no reason. They did it in about 10 minutes in a committee hearing, not allowing the Republican members to even discuss it, debate it. They gave no reason for it, and they just canceled these 5 members. I mean, in the history of UVA, not one member had ever been canceled by the General Assembly. This was 5. Mm-hmm. So that was step one, and that reduced the board from 17 members to 12 members, and it started giving members of the General Assembly and other opponents excuses saying there weren't sufficient Virginia residents on the board, there weren't sufficient alums on the board, after they had disallowed these people in the highest sense of hypocrisy to even become members. And then the second step was the day before Governor Spanberger took office, she put pressure on 5 standing members of the board to resign. And nothing like that had ever happened in the history of the university. And those 5 members included the rector, which is the head of the board at UVA, the vice rector, and incredibly, an alum, a couple of other alums, and Paul Manning, who had given a $100 million gift to the university to build a new biotech center. And the guy was not very political at all, well liked by everybody, part of the Charlottesville community. Mm-hmm. I don't see how that is even remotely justified. But
so I hope he's going to stop payment on his check if he's being treated that way. Do we know about that? Or
so basically, they eliminated 10 members of the university board.
And to be clear, this happened outside of the General Assembly session. So that was one of the things that was odd. The Virginia legislature is part-time. So it traditionally, as I understand it in Virginia, board appointments are dealt with during the session of the General Assembly in January and February, where we are now. And to meet outside of that and take action to prevent the sitting governor from appointing people is really a breach of what
well, actually, John, the way it happens is the governor actually, historically, when a governor is elected and they come into office in January, they don't make their first appointments until the end of June of their first term. And actually,
Is that because
historically,
people are rotating off of the board?
no,
There's
that's
a
just the way it's been. They don't,
all right.
yes, they rotate off at the end of
Yeah.
June. So they appoint 4, 4, 5, and 4. That's 17 over 4 years. So actually, it takes a new governor historically 3 years before their board appointees gain control of the board. And Governor Youngkin followed that. I mean, the Democrat appointees controlled the board for 3 years, basically.
Of his 4-year term.
And, it was in the third year, I think it became, yes, it is in the third year, at the end of the second year, in the third year, it took control. Mm-hmm. But the rector, who was a Democrat appointee, remained the entire 3 years into it. I mean, that's the way it's always been. And it's been not politicized.
And the theory behind it, Joel, is that this is shared governance, that the people of Virginia make a decision every 4 years about who the leader will be. It may be a Republican, it may be a Democrat. I mean, you had, 12 years of Democrat leadership, so the board, in theory, was representative of that mindset if there was a distinction between Republicans and Democrats. And that has always been honored as a reasonable way of governance for these institutions that answer to the state government, that nobody was able to just put their imprint on a school instantaneously after winning one election. You had to prove yourself and keep winning in order to totally transform something.
Well, that's also, I mean, that's true, John, but also it's part of historically the university, the governance of the university was not politicized. So the people that were coming on the board were focused on academic issues, were focused on governance issues, were focused on how best to oversee a university for its main purpose, which is to educate the students of the Commonwealth and students from the rest of the country, and more recently from the rest of the world as well. That changed at UVA about 10 or 15 years ago.
How so? What would you identify as the change?
It became highly politicized. First, it started under Teresa Sullivan, and then really picked up speed under Jim Ryan. And it was basically pushing a progressive agenda, and most of it in the form of what they called diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, but really was a progressive left-wing social agenda, which resulted in treating different groups differently, clearly. Certain groups were marginalized, other groups were put forward, and in bringing in to the administration and the faculty almost exclusively people who are on the left side of the political agendas.
So the diversity was not diversity of thought and balance and
exactly
objective analysis of the arguments the students or others may be making on the campus, and different voices being heard. It was your assertion is it was a left-wing attempt to stomp anybody who didn't go along with the DEI left-wing agenda.
And that's really true. I mean, I wrote 2 articles for the James Martin Center for Academic Renewal. The first one was called UVA and the Politicization of Our Campuses, of our college campuses. And the second was about the new McCarthyism at UVA, where people were mandated, faculty members were mandated to sign DEI agreements, that they supported DEI. What did they do to support DEI? I mean, that was no different than McCarthyism, really. You had to believe a certain way. or you were penalized. And like you said, the most important diversity at a university is diversity of thought. I mean, there was a saying that if everybody looks different but thinks the same, do you have diversity? You don't.
You
And
have a Benetton ad.
yeah,
The colors
you have
of
an echo
world
chamber.
colors. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
resulted in people who didn't believe in the agenda that was favored in self-censoring. And that was proven. I served on the university committee which drew up our free expression statement. And as part of that, we had faculty members and students and other members of the university community calling in or meeting with us or making submissions about how free problems with free speech at UVA. And there were many. And
where did
bottom
it
line,
manifest itself? Was it in the speakers who came on campus? Was it the students being told they were not allowed to make an argument? You know, I wasn't an adjunct professor at UVA, and there's certainly different standards at different schools. But at Virginia Commonwealth University, I would tell the students, you don't have to agree with me, but you have to make a sound argument if you're submitting something for me to grade. I'm not grading you on whether you agree with me. I'm grading you on whether you have successfully argued your point in a way that's coherent for someone like me who may disagree with it. I thought that was fair, not mandating that you just regurgitate what I've taught at the front of the classroom. Sounds like that mindset, which I thought was illustrative of academic freedom and thought that a university was supposed to perpetuate, that's been erased at this school.
well, I don't think, I mean, with faculty, there were mandates. As I mentioned, there was a DEI mandate, and that was for both their peer review and for people being hired. They had to sign on to it. So when you have a certain political agenda being institutionalized, plus some faculty members during my committee while we were in existence would come in and say that they were told to use certain language or not to use certain language in their classes. And students were aware when it's so overwhelming. I mean, DEI, you know, the former dean of the Yale Law School, Kronman, wrote a great article for the Wall Street Journal called The Downsides of Diversity. And basically what he said was DEI was a political movement masquerading as an academic ideal. And that is exactly what it was. And everybody knew it. So there's an institution called FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. And they come out with reports every year. And the report on UVA showed that in terms of self-censorship, there's like 260 some odd schools as part of this, ranked like in the bottom quarter, like 200th in self-censorship. Students are very aware of this. They won't speak up in class. There was a very famous, and you may have seen this, clip on the Morning Joe show. Joe Scarborough, who's no big conservative. His daughter goes to UVA, and they were discussing universities, and he suddenly just came out and said his daughter told him that she and her friends will not speak up in class because they're afraid of having retribution if they're not going according to the institutionalized thought process. I mean, that was on that show. I mean, this
in public.
Yeah.
Well, why hasn't there been pushback? You know, one of the things I used to admire about the American Civil Liberties Union was they clearly had a political perspective, but they were willing in the courts to represent people who didn't represent their political perspective. And I was very aware a Jewish ACLU attorney representing a Nazi or representing a member of the KKK, I mean, that must have really been a horrible emotional experience for that person. But their commitment to the rule of law and everyone having a fair trial appeared to supersede their own personal feelings. And that seems to, that mindset, which you struggle with, but you admire on some level, that seems to have been erased both in the courts and now at the schools. I would think some of these professors, even if they were left of center or way left of center, because they're liberal thinkers, would say we can't continue to operate this way.
Yeah, but John, that's a traditional liberal thought. The
Mm.
concept of liberal, what we consider to be liberal thought, is gone. I mean, they are not traditional liberals. You don't have John Kennedy and Daniel Moynihan and Scoop Jackson liberalism anymore at universities. You have a very strong progressive left-wing agenda where it's my way or the highway. And that has been implemented. I mean, Jim Ryan, shortly after taking office, put out his long-term plan. He called it Great and Good. That was his Great and Good University. But his, the concept of great, there are metrics in academia to measure great. Good is what is good is a much more subjective viewpoint. And his thoughts of what were good, which was a DEI agenda, others did not think. I think they thought, as I do, and many of us did, that it infringed on individual rights and individual liberty. And it infringed on the American dream that everybody should be treated equal as possible, and that decisions should be based on merit and character and not on the way you were born. That was out the window in the way
it seems, and it's anti-American, or at least the America that I grew up in. So here we are in 2026. We have Republicans having been soundly defeated, myself included, last year, people who would stand up for the things that you were articulating, and a new type of Democrat taking leadership at the state capitol. They're obviously hyper aggressive, and I think would like for you all to go away. What do you do in the coming months, especially if these members of the board did step down at either the request of the governor or some bullying from some of the folks associated with the new governor, Abigail Spanberger? What in the world do you do to fix this? It sounds almost like a lost cause to me.
Well, it's a good question. What do you do? Because, as I say, there's been this takeover, which shouldn't have happened, never happened before. I would say one thing, just to be fair, I think that Governor Spanberger's appointments that she did make seem to be a reasonable group, a qualified, reasonable group. And our hope is they will act not in a political manner, but in the best interests of the university, and that we can work with this new board moving forward. But the attacks...
But DEI is back, right?
DEI never left.
Okay.
DEI, the governor, Youngkin, after the board, unanimously, by the way, including the Democratic members of the board, voted to end DEI at UVA. That never happened. It was a song and dance that was being given to the board. And then when the Justice Department became involved, to the Justice Department, they just moved people around. They changed titles. They changed the names of different departments. So instead of having within a school, whether it's the college or the commerce school or the graduate business school, instead of having a DEI officer and a DEI office, it became the Office of Community Relations. But
same
none
people,
of the people
same
were
attitude,
fired. It
new
was
name.
the same people involved.
Gotcha.
So DEI truly never left. The question now becomes, we have a new president. And the attacks that were made on the board and the attacks that are now being made on President Beardsley, again, this is a well-organized, well-coordinated group that has hired a professional public relations firm on how to do this. And this is a group which interacts over the past, has interacted and continues to interact. It's a group of former board members and wealthy alumni and faculty members and certain student groups and certain members of the General Assembly. I mean, this is coordinated. And they first tried to marginalize the board. Then they tried to marginalize the Presidential Search Committee. And this is where you fight this hopefully with facts. And you try to, I mean, that's the main purpose of the Jefferson Council, is to bring the truth out. Because right now, a lot of these groups, in attacking the board first and then attacking President Beardsley now, they just make statements which are not backed up by the truth and facts.
And Beardsley doesn't seem like a right-winger to me. When I've read, I mean, quotations, perhaps they're taken out of context, it doesn't seem like he is someone way to the right who would be a Trump supporter necessarily. Or
as far, I think, as most of us who are in the weeds, as you might say, at the university, who really pay attention on a daily basis. He's certainly not to the right. He says he's not. I mean, right after he came into office, he said he is not political and he's result oriented. And that's
okay. Well, really I can handle that.
Right. But if that's the case, though, they don't like that. They want people to continue to go out there, advocate for, and to install their agenda. They're not happy with someone who is in the middle. I mean, that's what it should be. The agenda of a university administration should be to have no political agenda. That should be the agenda. They shouldn't be pushing left. They shouldn't be pushing right. They should be focusing on education, on having reasonable courses in the syllabus, and having faculty focus on educating students in a manner that doesn't push any viewpoint. That's the point of a college education. You throw out different viewpoints and let the student make the decision if it's being presented appropriately in mostly the liberal arts. In the sciences, that shouldn't be an issue at all. And yet, I think we're all aware that the politicization got into the sciences.
The sciences,
and the STEM,
which is shocking.
The STEM, maths became political. The medical school became political. But what you have is right now, and I think this is the headline, is you have a group of Jim Ryan's former backers, friends, acolytes, who are trying to recreate his administration, if not he himself, recreate what he was doing, and will do anything to avoid having a non-political person sitting in that office.
Right.
And, we could go back to the whole history of why Jim Ryan resigned, but the attacks on the board that they somehow were working with the Justice Department to remove him is ridiculous. The board could have removed him before. Justice Department didn't get involved until the spring of last year. Before that, we had major scandals that were occurring. In fact, two of the probably greatest scandals in the history of the university. One was what had happened before and after the shootings of our 3 student athletes. We still don't know because the university has never released an unredacted report. It was redacted.
Which is shocking. I have to call out Republicans for not demanding that too when they had a Republican governor and a Republican attorney general.
And then we had the health system scandal, which,
Mhm.
if people really start focusing on, is probably not only the greatest scandal in the history of the university, it is one of the greatest scandals in the history of the Commonwealth,
Yeah. Yeah.
and showed a total mismanagement of these events by the Jim Ryan's administration. I mean, if they wanted to fire Jim Ryan, they could have fired Jim Ryan.
For
They had plenty
cause
of
that was clearly
ammunition
documented.
if
Yeah.
they wanted to.
Joel Gardner's the president of the Jefferson Council. We could do a long form segment on some of the issues that he just brought up that I covered back when I was at the radio station. And it's very frustrating to watch a great school like UVA get dragged through the mud with bad leadership. And hopefully there's some way to save this school in the short term and elevate it again as one of the great institutions of learning in the United States. I know you're doing your part. Joel, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thanks, John, for having me on.
Yeah. I got a lot of family members who went to UVA. I didn't go when I was in high school, and everybody said, "Oh, do you want to go to UVA?" It was named as one of the top party schools in the United States, and that has never been not that I'm a little angel, but that just didn't it wasn't a match personality wise for me.